Hello and welcome to Goto My Mentor. My name is Susanth Kurunthil, and in this channel I talk about career in software engineering. Okay, so we've been talking about how you can be a great IT professional, or how you can be a great programmer. So today I will just come to the basics a little bit. So the question is, how can you be a programmer? So I have seen quite a lot of questions so that are thrown out there in many platforms where people ask, so how can I be a programmer? Say, for example, if I'm in some other discipline, my career was something else, and how do I become a programmer? So how can I get a career in software? So today I thought that I would just break that thing up and then, so try to answer some of the fundamental questions. And there has been so many questions like, do I really need a diploma or a degree in computer science or computer engineering to become a programmer? Or what are all the things that I need to do? Is it okay if I go to a boot camp? Is it okay if I take some courses on Udemy and things like that? So let's probably look at exactly what you really need to become a programmer. Okay, so before we reach there, let's probably look at what programming is. So if you're a programmer, when you program, when you create computer programs or software programs, that is when you become a programmer. So what exactly is a program? A program is a set of instructions that you give the computer to execute. So you write these instructions in a language that the computer understands, and then give it to the computer so that the computer can execute it, and then you can get the desired results. So that is the basics, the absolute basics of programming. Okay, so the bigger question is, so there are a lot of people ask, so should I go and then learn Java? Should I go learn JavaScript, C#, Dart, whatever it is? So these are all various languages that allow you to create computer programs. So the fundamental thing about programming is you need to give instructions to the computer. Assume that the computer is a toddler, and then you are trying to give instructions to the toddler to say, go do this, or try to do this, and then do this, and then do this. So those are the kind of instructions that you have to give the computer, because fundamentally the computer cannot understand anything. So you have to provide all the instructions in a way that the computer can understand. So that is what programming is all about. So it's all about instructions. So when we give instructions, so there are two basic parts to it. One is the instruction itself. The other one is the language of instruction. Okay, so when we talk about programming, many people think that so you go and then learn a programming language like Java or C# or HTML, Python, whatever it is, then you become a programmer. But I kind of tend to differ from there, because there are basically two parts to it. The first part is, what are these instructions? Whether you are writing those instructions in Java, Python, it doesn't matter which language you're putting those instructions are, but what those instructions are, that makes a huge difference. And then the next thing is only how you are giving the instructions. That is where your language comes in. So if you want to be a programmer, you need both. You need to understand the language. At the same time, you need to understand how you need to give the instructions. So what instructions you should give the computer. Okay, so the what part, that is your logic. So if you want to solve a problem and then you want to give an instruction, you need to understand what kind of instructions do I give. So the next part is, the language in which the instructions are given. So depending upon what you're comfortable with or what is appropriate for a particular type of problem, you give the instructions in a language. So for example, you are giving somebody an instruction, so go to the other room and then take the book which is on top of the table and bring it to me. Assume that you're talking to somebody who understands English. You can give the instructions in English. But assume that the person knows only Spanish. Then you will have to give that instruction in Spanish, but your instructions will remain the same. It says that go to that room and then get that book from the table and bring it to me. And then that, irrespective of the language, your instructions are the same. Whether you give the instructions in Spanish, French, Hindi, Arabic, Hebrew, whatever it is, it doesn't matter. So programming has these two parts to it. Just like how you give any instructions to anybody, you need to understand what the instructions are and then how you give the instructions. So just learning a language may not be sufficient, because at the end of the day, it's the thinking. So programming is all about thinking. It's about how you find the right instructions to give to the computer. So even if you understand the syntax of a language, it may not be sufficient, because ultimately it's about your logic. It's about the thinking process. So without the thinking, the language doesn't really make sense, So you need to figure out how to think. And then when you're thinking, so whatever is that problem that you're trying to solve, so you need to break it down. You need to break it down into a pattern. And then that you need to translate into that particular language. So to do that, you need to first understand the core concepts of programming. So there are certain very, very fundamental things about programming that you need to understand, and that is what we're going to talk about next. So what are these building blocks of programming? So when you talk about giving instructions to somebody, you need to understand these 6 things. And in my opinion, once you understand these things, the rest of the things are going to be much easier, and then you'll be able to give instructions to the computer to perform certain things. So now let's take each one of them individually and then analyze them. So let me give you some examples of how you give instructions. So for example, so assume that you are going to give an instruction to a child to do something. Say for example, I go and then tell the child, go to the other room and then pick that book on top of the table and bring it to me. Okay, so there are quite a bit of little things inside that thing. So the first thing that I'm saying is go to the room and then bring what? You need to understand what is that thing which I'm asking the child to bring. I'm asking the child to bring the book. And where is the book? The book is on top of the table. And then I am asking the child to go take it and bring it to me. Okay, so what is that data that is involved in there? That is the book. So when we really look at that whole instruction, it's all about getting something from the other room and bringing it here. And what is that thing? That is the book. Okay, and instead of say the book, if I say go to the kitchen and then get me a glass of water, so then the instructions are similar, but what the child is supposed to bring in changes. So instead of the book, the child has to bring water, and then water cannot be brought like that. It has to be put in a container. So you really look at in both these instructions what differs. is the thing that is going to get, the child is going to get and bring it. In one case, that's the book, and in the other case, it's a glass of water. So what is the difference? The way you handle these two things are very different. In the first one, the book, the child can go grab it and then, keep it in whichever way, keep it in whichever position and then bring it. Whereas if the child is going to bring a glass of water, then he or she will have to ensure that, it is kept, it's kept in the upright position, and then he cannot just tilt it because it's going to spill. So depending upon what is going to get brought here, the way you handle that is different. So in programming concepts, this is called, you need to understand the data. So you ask the computer to do certain things about something, and then that about something is the data. And then so you can ask the computer to print your name or print your age. So when you're printing the name and when you're printing the age, things are different, because one is a text information, the other one is a number. Okay, so depending upon what you are handling, things are different. So you need to understand what is the data that you're working with. Similar to the other instructions where we said go bring the book and then bring the water. Similarly, when it comes to writing a computer program, you need to understand how you handle a text data and how you handle an integer data or a numeric data. Okay, so depending on these things, your data changes, and then when the data changes, your approach to your instructions could change. And the way that particular data is handled, it will change. And assume that, if I ask the child to go bring a cup of tea from the kitchen, then if the tea is warm, then the child has to make sure that he or she handles it properly, otherwise he will get burned. So all of these things related to something called data, and then these instructions are all about how you handle that data. It's about how you understand the data and how you understand the data type. So these are the two fundamental things that you need to understand when you're writing programs. What is the data that you're dealing with, and then what is the type of the data. Sometimes, so you may ask, or rather you may write a program to upload a file. That's a completely different data. And sometimes, so you may write a program to accept certain information, and then some of the information could be name, age, date of birth, and stuff like that. So each of these data are different. Okay, so understand the data that you're dealing with, and then the data types associated with it. So for any kind of programming that you do, or any kind of language that you learn, one of the first things that you need to figure out is what are the different data types, and then how do you represent them in that particular language. So very key, data and data types. Now let's move on to the next core concept. So I call it the constants and variables. I will go back to the same instruction last time. Go to the kitchen and get a glass of water, or go to the kitchen, get me an apple. If that is the instruction, and then you know what your data type is. It's either an apple or a glass of water. So at the time of giving the instruction, I understand what the data is. So I know that the child is going to go bring an apple, or the child is going to go bring a glass of water. So So at the time of instruction, you know what it is, and that is what's called a constant. Because it's not going to change, because I asked the child to go get an apple, so he goes, fetches an apple. So the apple, that's a constant thing, so you understand at the instruction time or at the time of giving the instruction, you know what the data is going to be. And then that is what's called a constant data. At the same time, say, if I change that instruction slightly, I tell the child, go to the kitchen and then get something to eat. Get me something to eat. Then what happens is that things change drastically here. So at the time of giving the instruction, I don't have a clue as to what is that the child is going to bring, because there can be apples, there can be oranges, and then there can be a piece of bread, whatever that is out there in the kitchen. So I'm asking the child to go get something that I can eat. And the child goes there, and then he or she goes, looks at it, and then he finds an apple and brings that apple. So at the time, see, the child figures out what to pick only when he goes to the kitchen. And that, in computer programming terms, it's called, that is something which you understand at runtime and not at instruction time. So the instruction says, go fetch me something. And fetch me something, or that something is called a variable. I hope you're following what I'm saying. I say that go get me X, where X is something that I can eat. So that X is called a variable. And when the child goes there, the child finds an apple. And then the child brings that apple. So now the value of X equal to apple. So at the instruction time, since I don't know what the value of that particular data is, I'm just setting it as X, and then X is called a variable. Okay, so these kind of things do happen quite a lot in programming, so most of the time you don't know what data that you're dealing with at runtime. So I hope you understand the difference between the instruction time and runtime. Instruction time is typically called compile time, so that is when your instructions are compiled. And then if you don't know what your data is, then that is variable data. And then these variable data are typically kept, or rather, you denote that variable data with certain variables. And then you assign these data elements to those variables at runtime. So those are the variables and constants. So I hope that is clear. So constants and variables at every point in time, every programming language that you learn, you need to understand how do you figure out your variables and then your constants. And then these are very much tied with your data and data types. And assume that you're writing a program, and then you want to fetch somebody's age, and age has a data type of numeric. Okay, and then at the time of giving instructions, you don't know somebody's age, and then that age is something which is going to get into a variable at runtime. Okay, so these two are very, very closely tied up. So when you write a program, you need to figure out how do you represent your variables of various data types. Okay, if it's a name, it can be a string or a text. But if it's an age, that's gonna be a numeric value. If it's date of birth, that's a date. and then things like that. So the variables, constants, and the data types are something which you need to understand. And once you understand, let's move on to the next one, which is input and output. Input and output are pretty simple. Input is what you give to the program at runtime. And say if I say, go to the kitchen and then get me something to eat, and then when the child goes and then fetches an apple, so that input to that particular task is the apple. Okay, and once he takes that thing and then gives it to me, the same apple becomes an output of this particular task, or that the output of that instruction that I gave. And sometimes, sometimes if it's a complicated one, then, the input will be one, and then it can even get transformed into something else and become an output in a different form. Assume that I ask somebody else, okay, go get something and then make me something to eat. In that case, the input will be some of these so raw items that they can get from the kitchen. And if that person prepares a dish and then gives me that dish, then the dish is the output. Okay, so similarly in programming terms, you take an input, input could be your age, and then based on that, the program might be doing certain calculations, and then it might be telling you what your insurance premium is. And then that insurance premium is the output. So input and output, it doesn't mean that input and output will have to have the same data type. Even if the input is text, you may get the output as numeric. I'm talking about very, very, very simple programs and not something which is complicated. But I hope you understand the idea between input and output. So input and output has to be understood and internalized by somebody who is trying to get into programming. Okay. And then the next thing that we want to talk about is operators. And typically, an operator is something which does an action on that. Say in the earlier example, when I say go get something and then make something for me to eat and then bring it, assume that the person goes and finds 2 eggs and then a couple of vegetables, and then he performs an operation that is cooking. He might make an omelette and then bring that to me. So in that case, the operation that is happening on your inputs, that's called cooking. Okay, that operation is getting completed, and then an output is created, and then that is presented. And similarly, assume that I'm asking somebody to write a small program to add 2 numbers. In that case, 2 numbers are provided as the input, and then there is an operator called add. And then you are adding those 2 numbers and then giving an output as a different number. So that is an operator. So there are a lot of operators that every programming language provides, or these are things that the computers can understand. You can add, subtract, multiply, delete. So there are so many such operators out there, bit anding, bit oring, and then there are quite a bit of these things. So every time you learn a language, you need to figure out what are these operators, and then most of the time these are the same. Most of the operators are very, very similar. The only difference is that from language to language, how you represent certain operators might be different, but it's pretty much the same. So I hope you understand what operators are. And now let's talk about what statements are. A statement is something where you put out these things together. Say, assume that I'm giving an instruction saying that go to the kitchen and fetch something, and that is a statement. That is a pure statement where if you are writing that as a program, then so you can just provide a statement saying that, okay, assign an apple to the variable x, apple, or rather x equal to apple. So that is a statement. Or y equal to orange, or x equal to 2, y equal to 3, whatever it is. So that's an assignment operator. So you're basically assigning a particular value to a variable. That's called an assignment statement. And sometimes the statement will be output equal to input 1 plus input 2. So where you are assigning the output as the sum of two things. So you have two variables and an operator. So that becomes another assignment operation plus, plus there's a calculation operation that is also going in there. So you're combining them. And there are so many different kinds of statements, many of them are at the assignment level, and then there are many other kind of operations, or rather statements, that control the way your program works, and then that's called the control flow statements. And let me give you an example. So I'm asking somebody, go to the kitchen and see if there is an orange, then bring it to me, otherwise give me an apple. So you look at that thing. So I'm giving a condition saying that if orange is available, give it to me. Otherwise, give me an apple. Even though there are, there might be orange, apple, watermelon, whatever it is. I'm giving some specific instructions saying, this is a conditional thing, So there is a positive condition and a negative condition. If there's a positive condition, then I get the orange. But if it's a negative condition, then I do get an apple, and then I'm not going to get a watermelon with that statement. So you're basically telling, or rather you're giving an instruction that says, if this condition is met, do this. Otherwise, do something else. So this is basically something which controls how the execution happens, So whenever you are giving a condition, that is controlling the flow of your program operation. And sometimes it can be in a loop. Say, for example, if I tell somebody, go to the kitchen 5 times and then bring me 5 vegetables, so this person goes, fetches something, comes back, goes again, fetches something, and then this goes on for 5 times, and then in 5 different trips he brings 5 different things to me, and I'm giving one instruction saying that go there 5 times. So I'm asking that person to do the same, do an operation 5 different times. So that is a flow. And sometimes I can give a different instruction. Go bring 1 vegetable at a time till you don't find any more vegetable in the basket. Okay. So this person he goes, fetches 1 vegetable, comes back, he goes again, fetches, comes back, and then he does it till there are no vegetable left. So you don't know how many times he's going to go and repeat this, but he is going to go and then repeat this till a particular condition is met, which is when there is nothing more. So that's another way of giving an instruction. So these are all instructions that can change the way your operation performs. So in the first case, this is a conditional flow. The next case, you're saying that go there for a fixed number of times, and in the third thing, you're saying till a particular condition is met, go. So even at the time of giving an instruction, I don't know how many times he will go, because that number of times is purely dictated by how many vegetables are there in the basket. Whereas in the previous case, I know very clearly at the instruction time that he's going to go 5 times. Okay, so, and then there are many other control flow kind of statements, but I'm just giving you some basic information as to how these kind of instructions work. So once you understand these 6 things, whenever you learn a language, you will understand what are the basic constructs of a programming language. And there can be so many more things beyond this, but the fundamental thing that you need to understand are these things: your data and data types, constants and variables, input and output, operators, statements, and control flow. Okay, once you understand this, whether you are learning Java, C#, Python, whatever it is, you will get that basic understanding of how the language is structured. And once you understand that, it's very easy for you to learn anything beyond this. Nothing stops here. There are a lot more things, but this is something which is common to every single programming language. And this is something which you need to understand very, 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 very clearly. And once you understand this, and you learn one of these languages, you should be able to write some simple programs. And as you write simple programs, then so you can learn more, and then you can write complex programs. Okay, so in the coming videos, I will be talking about a lot more about how we can do many more things like this, but this acts as programming 101. Okay, so if you have any questions or comments, please put them below this video, and let's have a conversation about it. And please subscribe to this channel so that I can get you a lot more such videos. Thank you for watching.